Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, your ticket to all things college football. Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? Join us as we talk college football from the national championship to college rivalries to bowl games to the Heisman Trophy to which conference is the best. We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between.
What's going on? It's the GSMC College Football Podcast on the GSMC Podcast Network. You know what time it is. It's Monday afternoon, morning, evening, nighttime, late time, all time. It's Monday, so it's College Football Podcast Day. So you know what's up. It's your man, Ethan, once again. Bringing you a whole bunch of news today. We have a lot of stuff to talk about as the NCAA has been a little bit in the news as of recent. You know, the draft was not too long ago, but we're not covering the draft as of today. We will be covering other parts surrounding the college football universe. Like, for example, the NCAA has publicly spoken on the name, image, and likeness compensation for athletes once again, and it's looking like they're going to be moving in a certain direction, but it could all just be for a PR stunt or whatever the case may be. It may not even lead to anything of actual legislation. It just might be something they brought out to the table. Of course, that affects a whole lot of things. Maybe this is a ploy to make sure we get football in the fall or anything like that. But first, we must talk about what's on the agenda. So the NCAA Board of Governors is moving towards allowing student athlete compensation and adopting recommendations from the Name, Image, and Likeness Working Group to allow student athletes to be paid for sponsorships and endorsement deals as early as the 2021-2022 season. So the Board of Governors announced their support after a working group proposed the changes at a meeting on last Tuesday. The recommendations, if adopted, would allow student athletes to benefit from their name, image, and likeness from deals from third parties and businesses. The rules would go into effect, of course, in 2021 if the NCAA passes legislation next January. So, as part of the recommendations, athletes can sell autographs and memorabilia and be paid for personal appearances. The recommendations ban student athletes from wearing school-branded apparel in their personal endorsement deals, and they must disclose financial terms of their contracts to their athletic directors or their athletic departments, as well as their relationship with the parties involved. If they fail to share the details of their agreement and relationships, it could affect their eligibility. So this is some of the rules that or recommendations that have been set in place, as nothing is set in stone. The recommendations also allow athletes to hire agents to help them find marketing opportunities, but the agents cannot seek professional sports opportunities for them while they're in school. Student athletes could not endorse products like banned substances, which conflict with NCAA rules, and the NCAA could also allow athletes to accept endorsement money from boosters as long as it's not used by boosters to try and recruit players from their schools. An idea proposed at previous meetings included the NCAA creating a regulatory board to determine the fair value of deals and make sure athletes stay within the appropriate bounds. If athletes report their endorsement earnings, the board would reportedly flag excessive deals as a violation. NCAA President Mark Ermet said in January that he didn't know if the league or third party would regulate the market. And the battle for student athletes to benefit from NIL has been waging for many years, of course. So this is good progress comparative to where we have been for the past, 20, 30, 40 years or so. So in September, of course, Governor of California, Gavin Newsom, signed a fair Fair Pay to Play Act into law. The act does not go into effect until 2023, makes it illegal for California athletes or colleges to deny student athletes opportunities to gain compensation for the use of their name, image, and likeness. Multiple states have made several bills similar, like Florida, for example, and this is only going to continue to go up as time goes on. I'm really interested in this idea that for some reason about boosters, I think the booster thing is kind of funny to me, that they're saying as long as it's not used to recruit players for their schools, when in reality this is probably what they've been doing for a long time, right? I would assume that boosters and people who donate money to the school, that money can be used to recruit players. I feel like if you really do any sort of long investigation into the NCAA, first, Division I, maybe even Division II, but I would assume that the big time schools have a lot of boosters, and that money has to go somewhere. Of course, it's not always going to go into athletic facilities every year. It's not going to go into all these other places all the time. It's going somewhere, though. And I'm not saying that every school or the NCAA is 100% corruption within themselves, but come on, we are aware how this works out. And from what I heard, a lot of athletes that get Division I scholarships, they have a way to use that money whatever they want to. It doesn't always go to books and stuff. They kind of choose on where that money goes. So when you see all those Dodge Chargers in the parking lot, don't be surprised. And this is just probably something to keep their nose clean, but in reality, it's probably another way to make profitable money, or to make your program more appetizing, more appealing, is to start throwing that booster check around. I wouldn't be surprised if that's something that they are doing actively right now. And why wouldn't they be? You need an edge all the time in sports. Sports is all about having the edge over your opponent, no matter what the cost may be. If you're not cheating, you're not trying. And a lot of the NCAA tactics in college sports have been about, if you're not cheating, you're not trying. And if you get caught, it's one thing. It's very unlikely that they'll take away anything you've won away from you, unless your name is Reggie Bush, apparently, because you lose the Heisman when you took money. But in reality, that money didn't help you win the Heisman. If you know what I'm saying. So, they have weird ways of putting people, getting slaps on the wrist for some guys, and then other times they're very, very harsh on what they do. So it really just, sometimes the punishment does not fit the crime, and other times the punishment may or may not exceed the crime in many cases. So, or maybe it does not meet expectations, probably a better way of saying that. I don't know. But I do know this is a move, or this is a saying in the right direction. We don't have any actual legwork behind all of this, do we? I don't believe so. There's coming up in the next segment we're going to talk about, we don't really know exactly where this will lead us, because there's a lot of we're saying this now, but who knows when this will get done. And that would be a typical NCAA tactic of saying things without really doing any action. I remember a few months ago in January when they had the summit, and congressmen were basically belittling the head honcho of the NCAA, Mr. Mark or Met. He was getting under fire by congressmen because they were not moving on the deal. They did not bring a plan to Capitol Hill. They just sat here and said, we need your help to devise something. And if you're not going to bring anything to the table, said many congressmen, what are they planning? We're not going to sit here and just do all this heavy lifting for you, especially when you've had all this time to come up with something. And now the timetable is on you before all these different independent states decide to start making legislation behind your back, or not even behind your back. They're going to do it in front of you, but they're going to backdoor you, essentially. and undermine your business strategy, your marketability, everything that you do, everything you stand for, they're going to undermine it. And that's on you, because you as in the NCAA, because you couldn't figure something out beforehand. You didn't take the time to figure something out. You just kept doing stuff lackadaisical, and you didn't get things going at a timely manner. So now everybody's festering, everybody's upset because this isn't how you guys wanted it to be done, because you never wanted it to be done in the first place, and you chose not to look into it. And that's something that the NCAA always finds itself trying to battle between, always waiting to the last minute to do something. Like a bad student who has a 10-page paper due in a week, and the first day they decide to go drink and go out with their buddies instead of working on this paper, and now they have 2 other assignments they have to do, which they didn't expect. And now it's woe is me, but you should have started beforehand. All right, that's probably not the best analogy, but I tried there. Okay, we're going to take a break, and we're going to get more into this name, image, and likeness debate.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Although the NCAA has been very, very slowly on this matter, other people have been trying to push for this type of action towards name, image, and likeness for quite some time, a very long time. And these people are not very happy with or maybe I shouldn't say they're not happy. They're not really, I don't think there's fire to the smoke, so to speak. They see the smoke in the air, but there's no fire to it, because this is typically how the NCAA can tend to be on certain subjects. They say a statement or they make this empty promise, and then nothing really comes out of said promise at the end of the day, because they are known to to be very slow moving on certain things. So some have waited months and years and decades for NCAA athletes to be able to earn a wage, and saying that the college football atmosphere has been basically javeling this sort of mindset they've had for the last 100 years, and all of a sudden now it's time for a change, and the NCAA would claim a rare victory today, so to speak. But to be honest, I don't think it's going to be as victorious as they think, because a lot of people think it's a PR document. Donna Shalala, the former president of NCAA member schools Wisconsin and Miami, who now serves the U.S. House of Representatives as a Democrat from Florida, slammed the NCAA for a vague, nonsensical piece released only to entice the press and appease the public. Said in an interview last Wednesday afternoon from her Miami home, in fact, she has received such a report that still a university president, she imagines giving herself, wondering aloud, why are we paying all these people at the NCAA if they can't give us more details than this? And I think a lot of people are thinking about this like that, because there's not really, we don't have too much to go on at this moment in time besides the fact that they are going to try to pay these, or not, let me rephrase, because that's not what they're doing. They're going to try and allow players to make money off themselves. They are not going to actively pay athletes. That's something that I think we got to try and move away from. The NCAA is never going to pay athletes. That's something they're never going to do. At least not, not under the table. They might, I don't know, but in front of the public eye legally, they're not going to pay athletes, because that's just a whole other can of worms that if they weren't prepared for name, image, and likeness, they're never going to be prepared for having to create a stipend pay for every Division I, Division II, or whatever the case may be athlete in college sports in America. So many key figures on the nation's political stage held similar feelings about the NCAA's name, image, and likeness report. The congressional members most at the center of the NIL debate on Capitol Hill, the same ones from last January, are pleading for help on this matter, spent much of Wednesday's debunking the governing body of college sports for a proposal they say that revealed too little details, including too many NCAA-friendly restrictions. Maybe mostly ghastly of all, contained a not-so-subtle request for a congressional antitrust exemption. So, some lawmakers were befuddled at this notion. The gal quoted, "I want to see them learn how to make a decision first. Wouldn't that be nice? They don't have to committee everything to death," said Senator Marsha Blackburn, the Republican from Tennessee and member of a key Senate committee involved in the NIL topic in D.C. "We were given the NCAA a chance and their act together, and a chance to get their act together. But I think their leadership is weak. They are tentative and have shown they can't come through with a requisite list of standards. They need to realize that the shot clock has run out on them." Nice sports reference by Ms. Blackburn. So, nearly each faction of the NCAA athletic coaches, athletic directors, school presidents have at least one issue, if not 10, with Wednesday's report. But it's an external group and most powerful governing body in the world that really matters. Congress has the authority to alter the course of the debate over NIL, to write the final chapter, to cut the final scene, and lawmakers can preempt dozens of independent state NIL laws by crafting their own federal legislation, almost certain to be pro-athlete, to avoid what NCAA leaders describe as chaotic scene of potential 50 different relegations. So that is what I was describing before. They're going to have, if they don't get this under control and under their own wing, each state is just going to go do their own thing, and that's going to create issues across the board, because if some states have different rules than others that are more favorable to certain athletes, then you might see recruiting end up going somewhere in a place where we don't really want it to go to, I would imagine. So the NCAA has to get a hold of this. They have to figure out how to do this swiftly, timely, and in a manner that doesn't sound so needy for the help of others, because they've had the time to develop a plan for so long, and people are tired. Congressmen are tired. Congresswomen are tired of the NCAA just coming here empty-handed, looking for a way out of this without really working towards finding a solution that could benefit everybody, and they just want stuff to be handed to them at this point. It's very childish by the NCAA in that matter. So the Congress could also do nothing, setting up a collision course between the NCAA and one of its most athletically gifted states. Florida's state NIL law, if signed by Governor Ron DeSantis this year, is as expected, takes effect July 2021 and allows athletes more name, image, and likeness freedoms than the recommendations released Wednesday in the NCAA's report. Without a federal name, image, and likeness mandate, players from Florida State, Miami, Florida, and others within the state boundaries will have available to them a bevy of compensation options while the rest of the nation operates under more restrictive NCAA policies. Why wouldn't every 5-star recruit go to Florida, like I was just saying? As Representative Mark Walker, a North Carolina Republican and author of the congressional NIL bill that's currently on hold, they already have an advantage because of the weather. So, as you can see, a lot of people understand where this is. The more high caliber athletes you get, the better your program is. The better your program is, the better the money comes in. And the more the money comes in, the state is more successful during the fall season. And they have to they're looking at this. They want equal playing field before all these other states have to start making bills. And when you already have advantages in weather and advantages in location, and if you can make money on your name, image, and likeness in college, being somewhere close to like LA or being somewhere in California, being somewhere in the likes of maybe even close to Atlanta or in New York, anywhere that's big time with marketability, big time markets are going to start really, really dominating the college scene, because the bigger the market, the more opportunities to make money on the side via ads, via endorsement deals, things like that. So you're going to see a lot of the smaller schools, well, by smaller schools, I mean smaller markets, when it comes to outside of football, their markets are small. They may start to struggle a bit because maybe they don't want to go to Alabama because Alabama's not paying up, should I say. And by paying up, I mean the state legislation hasn't been made for them to receive money. So why not go a few states down to the right and go to Florida to make some money, make some coin while they're in college, because you never know when it's too late, so to speak. So this is not an easy thing to get past, but they've had time. And I think that's what Congress is saying. They've had time to do this. They've had time to really, really figure this out. And athlete advocates and pro-player lawmakers are very skeptical. The NCAA's report differs in at least 4 key ways for making many states NIL legislation. It excludes group licensing deals and things like that. And we're going to get into that real soon in the next segment about why the NCAA beloved video game is probably not going to be coming anytime soon.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
NCAA football games have a special place in many fans' hearts. And for good reason. The games were really, really fun and really, really good. Especially near the tail end of its lifespan. So the last game to come out was NCAA College Football 14, made by EA Sports. And there was one like no other, that genre of game, because to me, it was unique. It was different because most times any college type game, it was not professional, so to speak. So it was not pro teams. So there wasn't that pro prestige. There wasn't that pristine packaging or presentation had to live up to. It didn't have to live up to the shield of the NFL. And not to say that it wasn't a good product of a game in itself, but it didn't have to take itself so serious that it sacrificed the fun of the game, the core values of the game of just having fun. It had two modes in particular that really, really shined in of itself that still resonate with a lot of people today. And one of them is Road to Glory and the other one is Diamond Dynasty. Road to Glory was a career mode where you made your own player and you took him through the high school ranks into getting recruited to go to college. And what was fun about that game comparative to other football game titles with career modes in it was that you could choose to just play one position or you could play multiple. So you could play on offense and defense. You could be a running back and you can be a linebacker. You can be a quarterback and you can be a corner. You could do what you wanted to do in that game like really no other. It was really, really special, and it felt like you had a real connection with trying to make it to college. And when you finally did make it to college, and then you had to prove yourself, get playing time, all this, that, and third. Sometimes you'd be a 5-star recruit. Other times you might be a 4-star or a 3-star even. And you work your way up into being the 5-star guy that you so wanted to be. You could create your own personal high school. So the high school you went to, maybe the high school you played high school football for, or maybe just one that you went to, or maybe one that you would like to go to if you're younger than that. and you could create it, and you could make uniforms. You could make it look like your own. It was very, very customizable at that point in the game, and it was so colorful and unique and had its own flares. You could play with the mascots and have a football game with all mascots going. It was just a lot of fun. And then we get into the nitty gritty of dynasty mode, and you could take any team from Division I. I believe there's a whole, like, from the FBS to anybody around. They even had Eastern Carolina in the game and you build that franchise up. So it would take, sometimes it may take years, sometimes it would take near decades to build a championship level program if you stayed there for all that long amount of time. And sometimes you want to give yourself a challenge. So you had to go through the whole challenge of recruiting, getting good recruits, stealing them from other Power 5 schools and bringing them to your school and trying to win the national title. And at this point, the college football playoffs, I believe, did not exist yet. And it was either you made it to number 1 or number 2. So it was a lot harder back then to try and make a run at it. And it took a long time, but it was worth it. It had a bunch of replayability and this, that, and the third. But it just felt special. It felt different than any type of franchise mode. You didn't have all these years to get stuff done, so to speak. Well, you did, but you didn't have to worry about contracts. You didn't have to worry about re-signing players. There wasn't money involved in that, so to speak, which made it special because you had to worry about, you have these recruits, you have these kids for a maximum of 4 years, because I don't believe they did the fifth year eligible senior thing where you graduate, you got a graduate player, right? Or graduate transfers even. So they didn't have that back then, I don't believe. So you had a maximum of 4 years to maximize the talent that you had with some of these players. And sometimes they leave early into the draft and you have to watch them go and leave and go into the draft, and you have to rebuild. And you're always constantly trying to retool yourself with good players year in and year out, because at any moment in time, you could be out of luck and you have a bad season because you didn't have a good recruiting season, or you kept getting the bad hands, or some guys just didn't pan out. And that's just kind of how the game was, and it was always a give and take. You know, you got to try and pursue a national title while also trying to preserve the feeder system to your program, and that was always a bit of a challenge. But it was what made the game fun. So the game itself, people resell it, so it's third parties reselling the game. EA Sports does not produce the title anymore. And the game goes for so much money now. It's the last edition. I think it's even closer to $80 now because of the value it has. Because I believe the servers are still up. People still play online Dynasty because you can play it online too with your friends. And it really, really, really resonates with college football fans. And it's just a way to really, really immerse yourself in college football culture. And it's one of the most unique game series really in sports history. So I say that to bring up the idea that it could possibly come back. And in reality, under the guidelines of which the NCAA is trying to do, it's very unlikely that the game would come back. So although the Board of Governors moved towards allowing student athletes to be paid, there's no group licensing. So there was a group conclusion that group licensing, which would combine school trademarks with student athlete NIL in products like video game replica jerseys and trading card collections, are unworkable in college sports, largely because of the absence of a collective bargaining agency to manage the terms of group NIL use on behalf of student athletes. And the new rules would not allow the use of college logos, trademarks, and other intellectual property any sponsorship initiatives according to this paperwork, and the lack of a union or bargaining unit makes group licensing in college unworkable. So it's not looking like this is going to be something that can happen. So in order for NCAA football to make a return, the working group would need to amend its recommendations to the Board of Governors to include group licensing, and the NIL rules would go into effect for the 2021-2022 season if the NCAA passes legislation in January 2021. So there's a lot of things on the table that have been left off the table for this to really happen. And I know a lot of fans really don't care about if players get paid or not. They just want their game back, and that's really selfish to say. And of course, there's dedicated people who really make video games that are usable, because back in the day, you would not be able to have player names, right? There was no names on the players' jerseys and stuff like that because they could not pay for their likeness and they could not use their name and image. But people would create rosters with names for every college team in the game. So people would download these community-made rosters and use them in their own discretion. And I could see a future where somebody creates their own college football game with fake uniforms and fake names, and then they would allow people to upload and customize things like that from that angle, and that may happen someday. But as of right now, it doesn't look like NCAA football will be making any sort of big-time return, and it seems like this is just a way to get their foot across the door, so to speak, they as in the NCAA, on trying to rectify this really, really messy situation that should have been handled pretty much years ago, honestly, ever since when the first big scandal happened on name, image, and likeness. Or let me say, not scandal, but lawsuit. But we're going to take a break, and we're going to get into transferring news.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
NIL ruling and decision making has not been the only thing that the NCAA board of directors and congressmen have been dealing with over the past 18 months or so, but something like the transfer rule has been more of a talking point, especially in recent time, more than ever. And recently, the NCAA has been thinking about lifting the 1-year eligibility rule for a one-time transfer waiver, but the board of directors do not recommend the one-time transfer waiver at this time. So the NCAA board of directors said alterations to the waiver process are not appropriate. On Wednesday, they're considering a plan that grants one-time transfer waiver that allows athletes to play immediately upon their transfer, which would be the best thing really ever to do in college sports, because the transfer rule really didn't make any sense whatsoever in the modern era of sports and how we travel and how things go, and it should have been changed a long time ago. But this also affects not only football but basketball, baseball, hockey as well. So everybody's currently at the moment forced to sit out one season if they transfer, but a potential change to that waiver policy now is being put on hold. So the board agreed to lift the moratorium on transfer legislation in 2020-2021 legislative cycle, but recommended to the council that changes to the waiver process as suggested by the working group are not appropriate at this time. NCAA said Wednesday that the board members recommended the waiver process to be sensitive to student-athlete well-being, especially those impacted by COVID-19 in the interim period. So essentially, the NCAA is saying that due to the fact that we do not know if we are going to be having a season, it probably is not the best time for athletes to start transferring left and right to different programs without really having a chance to really they have all the time in the world to think about it. So I guess this is where I'm saying they have all the time in the world to think about it. So, but at the same time, they don't want somebody to transfer and not play. And then, of course, there's other reasons too. Because if you transfer, right, you transfer at this point, and you don't play for a season because of COVID-19. Say the season doesn't start. Do you have to wait a whole nother season to be able to play again because you transferred, or does this season count as your transfer window period? And I believe the NCAA are not heartless if that ever were to happen. So it's the same thing with dealing with the fact that some guys are juniors right now. And if the season does not start, does that mean they still have to wait another year before they're eligible for the NFL draft? I don't think that's the case. I think they'll be able to go into the draft next year no matter if they play or not. But that is a year away from college football. Some people would have, as some programs would not be able to recover from something like that, at least immediately, because they may have a lot of star players that really are necessary for instant title success right now, and they're not prepared to just instantly rebuild. Like, they're making maybe their final push before they had to rebuild, and if that's the case, that would be really, really unfortunate for them. So imagine if Clemson was not in a position to win in the next few years, back to back to back, and they were banking on this being their last big title push, and maybe that could bring in some more recruits if people see that they were able to really, really showcase what they're capable of. And at the end of the day, if the season is suspended, or should I say the season is canceled, and it's delayed longer and longer to the point to where it may just not happen, you have more questions than answers left on the table as far as being able to do things. And transfer window is one of those questions, so I understand why the transfer portal and giving the waiver one-time fee would be it'll be a little bit too premature to go ahead and give this a go because we're not in a normal season. So the board can still vote to alter the transfer rules in May, so this May, and a new policy could also be put in place for the 2022 year if it's not enacted in 2020-2021. So there's still chances of doing stuff in the coming month, but I wouldn't be surprised if this is just what it is at the end of the day, because there's no telling what's going to happen. In other news, Brevin Jones, former Mississippi State offensive lineman, has announced to pledge to Illinois via Twitter. So he says, the coaching staff showed me love since day one, checking up on me every day, just felt like family. Jones said that in confirming the news to Sports Illustrated. Plus, Illinois is on the come up and I want to be a part of it, and it's going to be nice to be in a different part of the country. So Lovie Smith, former NFL head coach, remember his last stint was probably in Tampa Bay, I think. So Lovie Smith is the Illinois program, received another verbal commitment from a Power 5 conference program player Thursday afternoon. and it was Brevin Jones from Mississippi State. So this is coming from the departure of a program just days after Mike Leach posted a now deleted tweet of a meme of a woman knitting a noose from her husband during self-quarantine, was reportedly contacted by Florida State, Maryland, Oregon, Georgia Tech, Missouri, Houston, and several other high-profile programs after announcing his intention to enter the transfer portal. So Jones told 247sports.com that Leach's comments played a part in his decision to leave the Bulldogs program a little bit, but it was also considering a move before Leach's Twitter gaffe. Due to initially committing and being signed by a staff of former MSU head coach Joe Moorhead, it bothered me kinda. It was kind of shocking, not something you expect, Jones said to 247sports.com. Jones is the athletic offensive tackle prospect from Birmingham, Alabama metro area, and spent last season as a redshirt year for the MSU program after signing a consensus 3-star offensive tackle by 247sports.com rivals and ESPN from Huffman High School after turning down a scholarship offers from Tulane, Louisiana Lafayette, Florida Atlantic, and Appalachian State. So he was listed on the roster as 6'4", 280, has 4 remaining years of eligibility, and may likely have to sit out for the upcoming season due to the existing NCAA transfer rules. Jones becomes the 5th transfer to commit to Illinois' program since the end of last season, and he joins graduate transfers Christian Bell from Wisconsin, a linebacker, Blake Jaresti, offensive lineman from Wofford, Desmond Dan, wide receiver from New Mexico State, and Brian Hightower, wide receiver from Miami, Florida, as likely sit-out transfers despite still only having one high school prospect verbally committed to 2021 recruiting class. Jones continues the list of success stories and for Illinois in the transfer market. The list of players that Lovie Smith's Illinois staff has brought into the transform the roster include Brandon Peters, Olawe Bituku Jr., Josh Imatorebie, Milo Effler, Tyron Sidney, Richie Pettibon, Donnie Navarro, Luke Ford, and Derek Smith. So these are just a whole bunch of transfers coming into this program that Lovie Smith has really eaten up on the transfer portal, but unfortunately, because of the one-time transfer rule is not enacted, like I previously just said, we are seeing guys having to sit out 1 year worth of eligibility, which probably means that they're going to be 5th-year guys, and it's just going to take a little bit longer for them to get that paycheck in the NFL. Or so do we think. Maybe the NIL will be enacted, and they won't have to wait as long to try and make some money on the side. But 9 times out of 10, they're probably going to be waiting just a little bit, and they're going to have to make some good plays in the college season to be able to make some money and make some coin. And like I keep saying, NCAA is not the one to be paying athletes who are students. They're not going to be paying anybody. So this is all coming from outside sources, and that's why this is probably taking longer than you would want it to. But let's take another break, and we're going to get into when maybe football might come back in the fall.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
The topic that football can come back in this upcoming fall school semester year, academic year, has been the big topic of conversation of every major sporting commodity, every sport in the world, even so to where people are being very critical of the U.S. because now the Korean Baseball League has decided to start up again due to their rigorous testing and making sure that everything that they do in their power would be for the safety of their players first and for their people first. They're going to be playing in empty stadiums very soon. And it makes you wonder, what has the U.S. done to where they are able to do even something like that? And not much has really changed on that forefront as of now. And we all want sports back, and we really want it to be, but if it's not safe, it's not safe. This past week's NFL draft, for example, was one of the first real sporting events in 6 weeks and went off without a hitch, bringing a record numbers across the country on Thursday while making an appearance on Jacksonville radio station 1010XL or 1010XL. SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey reiterated his hope for a college football season. He says, "My focus is on football as scheduled. The circumstances will guide that decision making. We want to be prepared." And Sankey said that he spent time chatting with nearly 100 student athletes over the past week, and overall reaction was to get back to it. Our hope is that people continue to pursue the healthy course. Sankey said, taking what I would consider to be a radical measures now so that we can get through this, learn treatments, figure out how to manage ourselves socially, and then get back to some type of normal function sooner rather than later. In order for SEC's hopeful timeline to return to college athletics, there are many steps that first must occur. First and foremost, the states and cities that are all pretty much in stay-at-home mode would have to start opening up little at a time. Last Friday, of course, Georgia had allowed gyms, churches, hair and nail salons, and tattoo parlors to reopen. Restaurants and movie theaters reopened on Thursday. Alabama's stay-at-home order expired April 30th, with beaches already starting to reopen. What Georgia and other states are doing points to a larger problem at hand in the world of sports. Some states are simply further along than others. In Louisiana, the stay-at-home order has been extended through May 15th, while California's stay-at-home order has been extended through May 31st. Sankey said in his interview that it hopes for all 10 conferences to be able to be on the same page by fall, but if they're not, should that exclude the ones that are already ready to resume sports from making a return? If there are a couple of programs that aren't able, does that stop everyone? I'm not sure it does, Sankey said, but the ability for us to stay connected will remain important. Hope is not a plan, but right now the desire would be to have 11 states and 14 SEC institutions moving forward in a collective manner and, like he said, connected nationally so that we can celebrate the return of college sports. So the feeling that the programs would need an additional 4 to 6 weeks of practice field before being able ready to return to play, just doing the math, that's a minimum of 2 months that would be needed to mark before the return of football, if that's even possible. So Canadian SEC hopes to remain on schedule and return in September. That would mean a return date of no later than beginning of July. Is that plausible? I don't think so. And just to speak on this for a little bit, since I live in one of the states that have decided to try and reopen piece by piece, I believe Georgia now has, since opening last Friday or a few Fridays ago, it has 2,000 new cases for COVID-19. And this is probably due to, one, more testing going on and more readily available testing for the public. But this just means that just because we are reopening doesn't mean that the virus is just going to leave. We're done with the virus now. We can just reopen. That's just not how that works. We probably have not flattened the curve as much as people want to admit, primarily because we didn't have enough testing to know just where the curve was going to plateau. We didn't know how many people were going to be confirmed with the coronavirus. And now that testing is a little bit more widespread, we're just seeing what that really means and looks like for the remainder of the next few months, that if we continue to open, we're probably going to have way more cases, more and more. And that just delays the coming back of sports. essentially. I feel like the only sport that really has a good chance of coming back immediately is probably baseball, just because there is not as much physical contact, and maybe they can figure out a way with baseballs and being able to keep them sanitized, whatever the case may be, get players checked more often, things like that, and play in empty stadiums. I feel like baseball may have a better chance. Maybe even golf. I feel like golf would have a good chance of coming back. But the only way anything comes back is if we band together as a nation and figure this thing out and really stop being selfish for just 1 minute. Let's stop everything being so money driven for 1 minute, to where we can look at this and say, this is not going to be sustainable for anybody returning at any time soon. This is not going to help college football come back, no matter what people think is going to do. It's just not going to help. College football usually starts September, early September. If this continues on, we're not going to be able to, I have a good feeling that at some point, this whole reopening and things like that is going to cease, because there's going to be another spike, and it might get worse before it gets better. And a lot of health officials have mentioned this, and it just does not look like this is going to be a good thing after all. And this might just be because we're all human. Everybody's a human being, and we all make mistakes. And maybe this is just another mistake driven by choices of others that other people have done. And people have decided to say, just because the government says we can go out, we can go out. And that's just not what should be happening here, man. Just because the government tells you that it's okay doesn't mean you don't have a right to think for yourself. Now there's people protesting all different types of ways down the street. People are bunched up together. People are angry because they want to be outside. And what people don't realize is you're putting so many others at risk. You're putting other businesses at risk during the long term. No one thinks about the long term right now, and that's the problem. We all want instant gratification. We all want sports back. We all want our lives back. We all want to travel. We all want to be outside. We all want to do this. But if we don't follow health guidelines and social distance ourselves and really think about the long-term effects of a virus like this, we are going to not be successful in the long term. We're going to have worse cases like what happened early on with Louisiana, and it's going to affect other places. As you see around the world, many places are starting to get it together, and the virus is starting to plateau, and places are really, really starting to buckle down and get a handle of this, to the point to where places like Korea are able to play baseball with no fans in the stadiums, and they have very, very, very good testing going on. And while we are still struggling with this because we have an innate problem of a divided attempt at one side wants to get back to normal and the other side wants to stick in reality that this is not over with. This is going to probably be another wave here in America, and it's going to suck. And it's probably going to mean that a lot of our sports that we want to see happen may have to get further delayed because of just honestly flat selfishness. And that's not cool. So, like I usually do at the end of these podcasts since COVID-19 has started, let's try and stay safe. Try and listen to our health officials. Try to realize what's important, and that is protecting others and protecting ourselves from further endangerment. And let's use our heads for once, man. Let's try to get ahead of this. Let's try to stay united on the idea of keeping people healthy and keeping people safe. But let's take our final break of the podcast, and coming back, we're going to do a concession confessions once again.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
For this installment of Concession Confessions, I wanted to go a little bit to the north, and I don't mean like in Game of Thrones to the north, King of the North, not things like that, but I wanted to talk about when things start to get cold, what do we do? And this is something that a lot of people that I talk to don't really talk about when it comes to food in stadiums or stuff like that. I think that there are two distinct things that need to be talked about. Number one, I don't believe there's as many options for warm food that people actually enjoy to eat in the cold during a fall football season. And I think there should be more options. There should be more things readily available, and maybe it's more of a local thing rather than a national thing. But the more I think about it, the more I realize that we don't have as many options to eat. And I also want to talk about not only not having options to eat, but our beverage options have become extremely limited. And I think there's time to shake it up. So let's talk about the beverage options first, shall we? So for beverages, typically when it starts to get a little bit cold, a little bit chilly, the first thing, booster clubs, PTA people, everybody starts bringing out the canisters. You know what's coming. It's hot chocolate time, and they start selling them for $1 each or $1.50, depending on where you are and what you're doing. They're going to start selling them for $1.50. It runs out by the first quarter, and then they have to make more, or that's it. It is honestly the weirdest phenomena in like food sports, the hot chocolate sales, because especially if you're at a collegiate place where you're outside and it's not an indoor stadium or anything like that, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be cold and you're going to want something warm to warm up your body because you're just sitting there, your hands are cold, your body's cold, and you're probably either standing up, jumping around to get some movement going because the chills are catching up, or you're rubbing your hands, or you're doing something. You have either mittens on, or you're not rocking mittens because you got to tweet every 5 seconds that whatever your head coach is doing is idiotic and you don't agree with it and things like that. So you need your hands to do stuff. So the best way to warm up your hands is getting a cup of hot chocolate. And really, after that point, what are you going to have with hot chocolate that's going to satisfy you really at all, besides probably another piece of candy, preferably chocolate, because it just doesn't mix. You can't eat a sandwich, like a Chick-fil-A sandwich. You can't eat a Chick-fil-A sandwich with hot chocolate. That's asinine. It just doesn't, I can't even see that tasting well. You can't eat nachos with hot chocolate. You can't have a hot dog with hot chocolate. I mean, in theory, yes, you can, or in practice, you can, but it's not going to taste well. The flavors don't mix. The profile is weird, and it doesn't really quench your thirst as much. You're going to have to first of all, the hot chocolate is like molten lava because they have it in this canister that's retains heat so much, and they make so much of it that it's just going to burn the roof of your mouth for the next 10 to 15 minutes. So by that time, you're probably already finished with the food that you've had. And that's not good. So it's surprising how little we get coffee at these sort of events. And maybe it's because when you're seeing the hot chocolate come out, it's more of a family environment. Sometimes it's more high school football, and I don't think high schools really promote coffee drinking as much as you would think it would. So hot chocolate would probably be sold more. There wouldn't be as much coffee, and maybe it's for price and also for actual delectability, because let's face it, having a hot pot of coffee, you can't just fill it up to the brim and have quality hot coffee. Some people are good at making it, some people aren't, and it's gonna taste weird. It's not gonna be the best, and either it's going to be too much water or too little, or it's gonna be too dark, and it's gonna taste really, really grainy, and it's gonna taste too earthy. It's not gonna be good coffee. And I'm not saying that you can't just go get one of those Starbucks things and bring it out, but that's very limited, and you want to be able to make as much money as possible when you're behind that cash register or behind that concession stand. So it's not as lucrative as you'd want, but at the same time, it would give better options, but you still fall into the same problem that you normally would anyway with selling something like hot chocolate and coffee. There's nothing on your menu that can really, really go with said food. So maybe it's time to add some more pastries on the menu when it comes to winter food, and more hearty, more fulfilling, more fulling. Yeah, let's use the word fulling. It will fulfill you, and it'll make you full during the winter. So maybe we get some eggnog out there. Some eggnog would be good. And if, alcohol was allowed, and, let's be real, a lot of people sneak in alcohol anyway, they would just start spiking their eggnog. And that would just be a interesting thing that you start seeing over there on college game days and things like that. And maybe they already do this, and maybe this is more of a in-stadium thing and not a tailgating thing, because tailgating is just everything, and everything's on the table. And maybe stadiums can take note from tailgates and start selling more weather-appropriate food. So what's weather-appropriate? Let's start seeing some more chili on the menu. Some more thick, hearty chili, the kidney beans and the chili beans and the tomatoes, good spices, something that will open your sinuses or open up your nostrils so you can breathe and you're not huffing and puffing from your mouth all night and all evening. That would be awesome. Let's have some chili. Let's have some gumbo if you're so inclined, if you feel a little bit spicy on the spicy side of life. Bring out some gumbo and just see how it is. I'm sure many, many people would pay $5 or $6 for a bowl of gumbo before they'd pay $4.95 for a Chick-fil-A sandwich. It just feels like it'd be made with more love and care anyway. It feels more homey. It feels right. The winter time always feels like home because you want to be inside the home. It brings you more closer to your family by default because you're always inside and you're not going out anywhere. It makes sense. If you're from the north or you're from a port city, especially somewhere like Boston or anything like that, I'm sure clam chowder is all the rage during the wintertime. Bring it out. Let's see it. Let's do it. I don't see why that would be a problem. And let's see some pastries out there, man. Let's see some warm pastries. Let's see some freshness in the mix. Like, let's do some donuts and coffee, man. Like, I don't see why that's not on the menu. You're already serving all this super, super big sugary candies and things like that. Why don't we get some pastries out there? Why don't we get something that at least makes sense for hot chocolate? Let's see something that at least makes sense for coffee. I don't want to eat a hamburger and coffee. I don't want to eat things like that. Let's maybe see some funnel cake or something, right? Something that will at least melt in your mouth. We don't need hot dogs and hamburgers or things like that. I'd rather even see leg quarters or chicken or something like that. Warm, super warm food, not stuff that just you typically see at a barbecue. I'm not looking for barbecue food or things like that in the middle of December. It's just not happening. So I can't see that happening. All right. So that's my take. Anyway, that will be the end of the GSMC College Football Podcast. And I would encourage you all to go ahead and subscribe, listen to the podcast on a weekly basis. It would be great and awesome. The content's good here. And also don't forget to rate and review us whenever you get a chance on whatever platform you listen to. So please, 5 stars, 5 stars. Leaving a review is very, very helpful, and I would encourage everybody to do so at all times. Please help us out. And don't forget to follow our social media. We try to stay active on there as much as possible. Please interact with us, and we'll hit you back all the time, man. We love questions. We love interacting with our fellow listeners and things like that. But with that said, this is the GSMC College Football Podcast. I'll see you all next Sunday/Monday. See ya.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network, from football to basketball, baseball to MMA, and even soccer. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast.